Hear ye, hear ye, hear ye.
Making a public declaration to the people.
Yeah.
Welcome in, everybody.
Yeah, hello. I just wanted to hit my desk. Hopefully that wasn't too loud, or lad. Either way.
It was a loud lad in the warehouse.
I was a loud
how you doing
lad.
today,
I am
Brad?
a loud lad. I am feeling good. I don't know. I gotta give a shout out to the warehouse team. You know, Jason leading the charge, and then Graham and oh man, I just blanked. Graham,
that guy's not getting a shout out.
Yeah, I don't know. Evan. I don't know why I blanked on Evan's name for a minute, but Graham and Evan and Noah yesterday. Jason tasked them with like cleaning up the warehouse and tidying up all the disc rows and, you know, relabeling everything, re-alphabetizing. It just looks so good in here. It just made me very, very happy this morning coming in. So shout out to the warehouse boys for that. That's very, very cool. What I'm curious about, Robbie, and I've purposely not talked to you about this, like, we don't typically do this in the intro, but like, give me a rundown of Disc South. Give me a little recap, like a couple minute recap of Disc South.
Yeah, it was fun. So I have this was my first year not going to Disc East, formerly the artist formerly known as the Northeast Disc Golf Expo. But yeah. I really love it up there. I think that it's definitely unique, and that at Disc East you are in snowy conditions because you're in the Northeast in January. So there's like cabin fever type vibe. I lived in Michigan for 3 years, but it was like middle school for me. So I don't think that I think that as a middle schooler, you like always have cabin fever when you're stuck inside the house, right? So hard to equate. True. But for you, Brad, like living in northern states, I'm sure that winter hold off is like a very real thing of.
Yeah,
I'd like to see
that
the
first
sun.
like 50-degree day. Yeah.
I'd like to see the sun. I'd like to see grass. That'd be nice.
Yeah, grass is cool.
So that one always has its own vibe. And the hotel and the conference center that we've been using, I've been told that it's getting an upgrade this year. Where Disc East has grown. I always joke that it's like stuck in the 80s. Just the event itself, or not the event, the building itself. So when we go, when it's like, hey, we're going to Dallas, I'm like, okay, what place are we going to find in Dallas? And we roll up, and it is just like the nicest hotel in the world. I told my wife, I was like, you know, you're in a fancy hotel when you open the door to your hotel room, and there's like a little key card for the lights in the room. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
That's where you're like, all right. Next level, baby. So
we are in 2025.
Yeah, so
right now.
it was such a nice venue. I think that it was really really great location. There was a ton of events, and the nice thing is that Ben has like for the overall event, because he has East to look at, he has like a template. So he was able to copy that really well. What was definitely fun about this one was it was much more of a creator summit, it felt like, because the pros that were there, we had Brody was there for Saturday. Chandler Kramer was there both days. GT Hancock was there. Tristan Tanner was there. Emerson showed up on Sunday. And now if there were other pros there, they're going to be really offended because I'm not naming them. But that felt like the biggest names that most people would know were there. So it was very much like the draw was sort of the creators, but it also created a cool opportunity because I love to like message and try to connect with other creators. And so like I'd never met Bedanza in person before, but he was there. So I finally got to talk with him and then got to talk with Broderick, got to talk with Jay Milley. I actually played with Jay Milley on Friday. That was a great time. Classic Hunter Thomas turns on competitive mode and suddenly we're all in trouble.
Yeah, that's a dangerous mode for
Trevor
sure.
and I,
you don't see it a lot. You don't see it a lot on camera.
Trevor and I play with our food. I will say that we were we were a little taunty, but no, it was great. So we filmed a not triples. We filmed a doubles video, but there were 6 of us that'll come out on Foundation Main. It really was a good time. Very, very exciting finish. But overall, it was just really fun. And it was fun to connect with people and fans that are in the Midwest. I don't know if we would consider Texas the Midwest, probably just still the South, but the Mid South. So
Middle
Middle
America.
America.
Middle America.
Yeah. That was, and it's also fun because you just have no relation to like how far things are. So like if I'm here in Birmingham, right, and I'm like, if I drive 3 hours, I'm in Atlanta, I'm in Tennessee, I'm in Mississippi, or I'm still in Alabama. Like that's, I could very quickly jump to 3 states. Whereas over there, you're like, oh yeah, we drove 3 hours. They name a city, and you're like, yep, that sounds like a place. How far did you drive? And they're like, I drove 3 hours, and you're like, all right, cool. What state are you in? And majority of the time, the answer is Texas. Like we're definitely still in Texas, but there was a lot
Big
of
state
Oklahoma
people.
guys and gals that drove all the way down.
Yeah.
So that was really cool. Got to be part of a seminar that Brody jumped into. It was a content creator panel, and Brody jumped in last minute. Bless that man.
Oh,
It
man.
was electric. Like there's just a rawness to Brody in terms of like his approach to content creation, which I really just appreciated. I think it brought so much to the panel. It was really fun. And then and then just getting to hang out with Foundation guys. We had one of the most exciting Cheesecake Factory dinners of all time. That was a good time. And then we went into an escape room.
Oh.
Kept the tradition rolling.
Oh, I heard about the escape room, by the way. Hunter filled us in on the can we say complication?
Dude, it was Brody gave that guy so much to work with, and he just wasn't having it. Like he just
Bro wanted to go home at 10 o'clock as well.
Yeah, I did not want my next room to book. That was for sure the vibe. My favorite like little subtle moment between me and Hunter was they asked me while we were at the Cheesecake Factory, because we ended up at the Cheesecake Factory because Kelsey wanted to go to the Cheesecake Factory. And then sadly, Kelsey did not join us because she had Jason's Deli at home. So it was just 5 guys rolling into the Cheesecake Factory with a bunch of people going to prom. So what are you going to do?
Funny.
But so we're there, and Brody's like, so what do you think the record is for this room? And I was like, well, technically Breakout, like as a company, doesn't keep records. It's just not something they do. And also it's tricky because Breakout like gives unlimited hints. So someone could ask for a ton of hints and they break out in 20 minutes. Do they actually have the record? You know, like real question that everyone's trying to figure out. And so I was like, when I was a game master, I would always just try to say some like ridiculous time that I knew most groups weren't going to get, like 32 minutes. So we roll into the room. The guy's already stressed out of his mind because Brody's giving him like great energy. Like he tells us like, we're going to walk in the room. Don't touch anything because you may accidentally start the room. And when he says don't touch anything, he just locks in on Brody and just stares at Brody for the rest of the speech. And then as soon as we walk into the room, funny. Brody's like, this is kind of a small room. I want to touch things. It was just like, oh man. So we like get in there, and then Brody's like, all right, before you leave, Gabe, got to ask, what's the record for the room? And the guy's like, well, technically a Breakout, we don't keep records, but fastest time I've ever seen was 32:30. And then Hunter and I just lock eyes because as soon as he said 32 minutes, Hunter was like, he's making this up. For sure he's making this up. And we broke out in sub 30. It was like 29 something. We crushed that room. So that was also, Brody kept calling me the 3-pluser. That was probably the funnest moment. It's because I worked at an escape room, probably unsurprising to most of our listeners. And I worked at Breakout Birmingham. So same company, just our franchise location. The rooms are the exact same. So that always makes it tough when we travel, like as a Foundation crew, and they're like, oh, what room do you want to do? Because like at Breakout, there were 8 rooms, and I know how to run 6 of them that they had available. So it's like, not only have I done this room before, but like I can actually walk you step by step. And the codes are probably different because they have different locks, but like different actual locks, but it's still going to be a 4-digit that you're going to get from looking at the fingernails of blank. So like, so we, like you had to sign this waiver at the beginning, and it's like, how many rooms have you done with breakout before? 1, 2, or 3 plus? And as soon as we all like filled out our like waivers, Brody's like, Robbie, did you check 3 plus? I was like, I did, and he goes, that feel good? The entire room, like every day, he's like, what do you think? 3 plus? 3 plus? What you doing? 3 plus? Oh, hey Gabe, we got a 3 pluser in the room. So dude was gassing me up. It was a good time. Contrary to belief, when you see me and Brody on camera together, sometimes Brody does gas me up. It's a fun time, y'all. It's a fun time.
That's good. Yeah, that's one experience I've not been blessed with is I've played a lot of like card and board games with Brody, which are electric. I can't imagine what a escape room is like with Brody. So maybe next time he comes here, we gotta go jump over to one of these escape rooms here locally, because that sounds like a great time. Personally.
Yeah. And I mean, dude, when we got told to be quiet, Brody wasn't even like Brody level. He was like flat volume. It was a time, y'all. It was a time. It was a core memory, core foundation memory for sure. I've enjoyed it. And we'll keep the ball rolling at MCO here in about a month.
Yeah. Crazy to think about. So anyway, so today's episode, we decided like, hey, we had quite a few questions from the Q&A a couple weeks ago that we did not get to answer. And we love you all, and we want to make sure you're heard as well. So we had a little bit of an opening in the schedule. So we thought, hey, let's go ahead and grind through the rest of these questions. So Robbie, I think we can go ahead and just jump into this. I will say I did enjoy the last episode a lot. So hopefully there wasn't too much controversy in our takes there. But it's always fun to get a little fired up. And, we all have things that we're passionate about, right?
Oh, for sure. For sure. I'm all about it. All about it. Guys, we got some good questions today coming from the old Instagram. So if you're not following myself, Brad, and In the Bag on Instagram, we're actually talking before we hit record today about what are some social posts and things we can be doing on In the Bag itself. But the first question comes from PRots242. What are some ways to practice mental game, especially when it comes to putting? So, yeah,
I don't
Brad,
have you were the coach here, so I'm going to defer like actual disc golf advice to you. But I think where I can add some, and this is where I think like typically, if you watch Putting League this week, not typical for me, but typically even in my worst putting, I still am like an average putter, and when I'm on, I'm really on, because it comes from like kind of the focus I had from archery. I did archery my entire like life growing up. And there's a lot of obviously mental game there, because you have to really focus in on what you're doing. There's a lot of variables, it reminds me of putting in a lot of ways, to be honest. I think for me, I do my best putting when I don't have to think, if that makes sense. Like I'm not thinking about like, all right, I'm going to bring my putter down. It's got to touch this side of my leg. When I got to pop up, I got to like use my front foot and kind of lean into that. I got to make sure I open my hand. I got to make sure I'm like releasing flat, blah, 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 blah. Obviously all those things are important, but I think obviously with practice, a lot of practice, you get like your putting stroke and it's more natural and you don't have to think about the parts of it. So I think like obviously with good preparation comes good performance. So I think that's like number one for me. Number two is being able to like shut out everything around the basket and just focus like through the basket. I had to do that like with archery with targets a lot, target archery and competitive archery, like that is really similar to disc golf in the way of like you have a trail, you go in the woods, you have usually 40 targets you're doing, you do like 4 rounds of 10. That's variable, that's typical. But you'll do like those courses and like you'll go up to a target. You have to you guess how far it is. And then you have to shoot accordingly and try to score. There's different terrain, very similar to disc golf in that way and on a small scale. But in those situations, you had to really like, all right, there's tunnel shots, there's trees, there's limbs. You have to like kind of block all that stuff out, because you'll like tend to pull your release and your arrow will go toward those things and you'll pull away from your target area. Very similar to putting. So I try to, if I'm having a rough day or like I feel like really on, I feel like I have like this clarity of like really only seeing the basket. And like I'm not, yes, I have to pay attention to like if I have an elevated putt or not, but I'm not like thinking about that. I'm like, okay, I'm just going to do my putting stroke, and I'm just going to adjust the power on it. And I'm not thinking about this tree limb. I'm not thinking about this. I'm not thinking about like behind the basket. I've just got to think about like disc into that chain into the pole, and putting through it so I don't short arm it. So I think like closing out the obstacles and variables around the basket mentally helps me, and just focusing on the basket only. And I think the third thing for me, mental, is just being able to accept that bad shots are going to happen. I'm not great at that, but being able, like my putt on hole 1 does not determine my putting for the whole day unless I let it. So just like kind of carrying that mentality around. So those are my 3 that I've applied from archery to putting and disc golf.
Yeah, I think all really solid. I think I would just add on routine is king. Brad kind of hinted at and talked about it in terms of like turn the brain off, do the putting stroke. If you build a routine, no matter what part of the course you're on, building a routine is huge. And I think I dropped a video about this, like it feels like a week ago, but it was probably like 2 months ago at this point. And it was talking about when you build routines, what to look for. The video, I think, is one of my most important ones I have on the channel in classic YouTube fashion. It didn't get like a ton of views.
Right.
But it's really finding that routine, building it as a routine that is not a full 30-second routine. Because you may think like, oh, well, I have 30 seconds, so I can build a nice long routine. But what if you have to make an adjustment, things like that? So for me, I always like to try to build a nice 10 to 12 second routine that if I have to reset, I can still come back in and do the full routine again without breaking my time limit. So like, oh, I had a bad thought halfway through the routine. Awesome. Step off, reset, come back up, do the routine, drill the putt, things like that. So I think routines definitely help. And then the other thing that I'll say helps a lot, and personally, I think it helps more so with putting, because you mentioned like, how do you focus on the mental game with putting? Because on drives, unless you're playing a really like simply designed course, you're not going to throw the same drive 18 times. But most often, the putt is going to feel somewhat similar at least 3 or 4 times while you're on the course. Like you're going to have 3 or 4 10-footers, 3 or 4 20-footers, whatever it may be. It feels like there are days where you're just parking the basket, and there are days where you're just 20 to 25 the whole day. And so when it comes to like finding consistency in putting, another thing that really took my game to the next level was realizing what my misses were and what was causing them. So for instance, like if Brad is in putting league, Jason and Brad roll up to the office for putting league. So Hunter and Trevor and Connor and Silas have the chance to like warm up that morning. The warehouse boys are just rolling in. So let's say they throw their first putts from the 20-foot station or 25-foot station. I don't know which one comes first, but they throw their putts, and immediately a putt comes out of Jason or Brad's hand, and they're like, ooh, that's off. It'd be very easy to spiral into like, I'm on camera, I'm having an off putting day, and now Brad doesn't get to zen out and just like do his stroke. He's stressing every single putt, worrying about it. But if his putt it came out super nose down, so he was trying to get it there, if he knows that miss is caused by releasing the putt late, like releasing it super high, instead of having to focus on the whole routine, he can just focus on that singular point and let the rest of the form take over and be like, pop it early. And if he pops it early, and then his brain's going to turn off and go into that stroke on the later part of it. So I think there's little things like that, like, oh, I yanked it right. Awesome. I'm either over rotated on top of the disc when I'm putting, for our visual watchers. Something that I end up doing a lot is I get over on top of the disc. So I start gripping it more at 12. And so instead of like 2 or 3 on the side where I like to hold it. And so if I'm yoinking it and I'm going here, I'll just adjust straight to 3 o'clock, like fast, because I know that subtly I'll fix it throughout the round, but I'll start at 3 and do that. And then I get to go brain off. So finding your miss and then slotting that into your routine so that you can just kind of like lean into what's good can be really, really helpful.
That's a good point. I feel myself doing that a lot. And I think another way to say that maybe is like know what corrections you're going to have to make at some point, like your common corrections. Because I think I do the same thing, Robbie. I'll like I know it because it's like a little uncomfortable. I'm bending my wrist like up to it's like 12 o'clock. And I'm like, well, no wonder I'm like pulling stuff. It's funny. I'm adjusting to the left on accident, but I'm pulling to the
Yeah,
right.
well, your hand
And
has
I'm
to
like,
get
oh,
out of the
okay.
way of the putter. Like, and where it
Right.
ends up happening
So
is you go to throw a putt, and then all of a sudden there's just like this extra whip that happens at the end of the shot, and then you're
exactly.
like, oh, that's
Yeah.
going right. And you're like,
Hmm.
I feel like I didn't do anything different. How did I get this extra whip? And then I look back
Hmm.
on video, and it's like, oh, you silly, silly man, you were on top of the putter. Like, how is it supposed
Yeah.
to go
You're giving it
through
more. Yeah.
your hand? So if you're
Hmm.
spin putting, it's great. So yeah, that's like the whole thing. But if you're push putting, like I am, it's not good. It's no good.
There you go. All right. Well, that's the episode.
Yeah.
I'm kidding.
We got Big Timber FPV. I learned throwing everything on a slight hyzer. I've had folks tell me this is bad form. Is it? I don't think so. I think that everyone had the issue would be is if you don't identify your natural release angle. We've talked about this a lot here on the podcast.
Yeah.
Is someone will
Yeah.
come in and we look at their bag, and initially Brad and I were like, "Uh-oh, this is like this bag is super overstable." So we definitely need to look on the like the super understable side. But the longer we do this, we've kind of looked at like, oh, everything's super overstable because their natural release angle is Anheuser. They're the future Gannon Burr of the world who loves to throw an Anheuser. So they have to have a little more stable stuff because throwing a straight shot is just a baby flex throughout it. I think this is also helpful. Brad, you've got some space. You've worked the retail shop, like I'm sure several times before. When people come into the shop, knowing this like natural angle preference and everything can really influence like how you suggest
sure.
discs when people come in.
Yeah, that was always my favorite question to ask is because even beyond like how far someone throws, I think it's more of like pairing them with the correct disc, so that'll naturally adjust that, right? I mean, and ask them kind of like you can tell pretty quickly if you. I will ask people like, "Hey, hold the disc like you normally hold it," and then like give me like a little preview of what your like warm up throw is, and like you can tell pretty quickly like what that person's like actual throw is going to look like. What's nice about Tech Disc having it here now is like also showing people to separate thought coming back to yours. I think being honest about your throw angle is good too, and just really know what it is so you can adjust accordingly. And like Tech Disc has really been great for that for a lot of different reasons. For me too, because I'm like, oh well, I thought I threw on like this quite a bit of like Anheuser. Well, I don't really throw on Anheuser. My form I was pulling through on Anheuser, but like actual release, if I like release on Tech Disc, I have like a baby Hyzer. Like it's like 8 degrees of Hyzer. You know what I mean? So it's like really good to know that also it's not necessarily like even the angle, it's like my form that's like pulling through that way versus like what I'm actually holding and trying to throw at. So I have to agree with you. I don't think I don't know. I mean, I'm sure there's like a wrong way to throw, right? There's a wrong angle to throw on. There's like probably the extreme Hyzer, extreme Anheuser.
Totally.
All those are like quote unquote probably just not good for your body, like for the health of your muscles. I would think, but I think it's just to your point, just knowing what you throw, and that's okay. Just adjust accordingly.
Yeah. Like, and it definitely, it's why when you have people caddy for you or you're working and playing doubles and getting suggestions from others, them knowing your natural angles also works. Like, we talking about that round that we filmed at the expo with the doubles round. There was a shot that comes up and Trevor was like, "Oh, are you just going to throw like a turnover here?" And I was like, I think I'm going to go forehand. And he was like, oh, I think you could just like soft throw this, like throw this disc on a turnover. And I was like, dude, Trevor, my natural release is more Hyzer than Hunter. So like me throwing an Annie, the odds of it going well versus me just pumping a forehand out there, vastly different. So like I realize that's a weakness of my game. And like you just end up seeing, okay, like I think of hole 3 at New London, and it's like I do actually think that I've got a better chance of getting down to the basket by going the forehand through the right gap of those trees than I do throwing a turnover the whole way there. type deal.
Yeah.
So
Right.
you learn along the way, and I think it helps leaning in, like you said, being confident in what your angle
Am,
is.
am I like incorrect, Robbie, in saying that are a lot? This is a very blanket bold or blanket statement. I realize it
Okay.
doesn't apply to everything, but do are do you feel like disc golf discs are designed to be thrown on Hyzer?
I think that disc golf
It's an
discs.
obscure
Yeah.
question. It's an obscure question, but
Yeah.
physics.
I feel like they're designed. I've always explained them as being thrown flat. Like I think that's the goal is that they're thrown flat. Now, the issue with that is that the people actually testing this, nobody throws perfectly flat. So slight inclination. I do think that more people throw Hyzer than like natural releases Hyzer than Anheuser, and I think that has to do with frisbees.
Okay, yeah, because they're typically more understable.
So if you're coming
and
from,
people have to throw
if
them.
you've thrown a frisbee at all before, you're coming in here, and I think lots of folks that end up with a natural Anheuser release angle are ones that got into disc golf coming from frisbees, or really just got when they got into disc golf, they wanted distance fast. And the easiest way to create distance when you first get into the game, because people don't often end up with super understable stuff in their bag, is they end up with something neutral or overstable, and they just yam on that thing and give it the beans on Anheuser, and that just defaults to like how they throw a disc.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'll save my physics-based questions for another time and maybe another guest. But
Yeah.
I have a ton of questions based on that. Also, like Hyzer flipping. Is it more true? Can you get more? Because I think about a Hyzer flip and like the speed and rotation that it takes to do something like that, and the actual distance difference you see in like a Hyzer flip versus like a straight-on like shot. You know what I mean? Anyway. Well, physics episode coming soon. Maybe that's episode like 180 or something. All
Yeah,
physics.
so I'll use this as a gateway to the next question. Someone asked if you could only throw one speed of discs, what would you throw? Like what speed would you throw? And my gut answer was 7. I don't think I stick with it, but I think about this exact question you're asking of like, or they got asked of natural angle. And I go to one of your favorite discs of all time, Brad, the FD. If I found someone who had a natural release angle of Hyzer, an S-line FD, they throw 300 feet, natural release angle of Hyzer, an S-line FD, perfect disc for them. Like it's going to stand up, it's going to ride straight, it's going to do its thing. A Champ FD or C-line, sorry, you guys all know, the real ones know.
Yeah.
A C-line FD isn't necessarily going to stand up right off the rip for them. But if I found someone who had like a slight anti-release angle, a C-line FD would be perfect for them. So just that little bit of preference changes the disc. But for me, I think I'm going 5 speeds. I think I'm just going to, it's super basic. I don't know many people who would choose something otherwise. You can putt with it. It's going to be meh. But I'm doing buzz battles on my channel, and I'm just realizing how many discs are in the 5-speed category that are just a blast to throw.
Yep. That's exactly I had the exact same reaction. My gut was 7-speed because of the FD. And the E-Dug, and I was like, no, realistically. And then I thought about 3 speeds because like NV and putters, like they're a blast to throw. But I think variety, fun, both semi-okay for putting, but also very usable for all other shots. Definitely 5-speed for me too. Because you got the Hex in there, you've got the Bobcat, you got the Quake, you got the Buzz. Like you said, there's a million discs you can throw in that 5-speed category.
And I'll throw the caveat: if we're saying that I still get a putting putter, I'll jump to 7-speed immediately, like without even asking. I would move to 7 speeds and just learn to control my angles and things like that on landing. Just because I think that throwing 7 speeds, throwing the Evader, throwing the Eagle, the Cicada, like all time. Really great options and great times. So. Okay, this is a disc that I've not held. Have we ever had any Area 51 discs?
Area 51 discs?
Yeah. Or no, it's Doomsday. Sorry. There's Doomsday discs. Yeah. There's an Area 51 from Doomsday.
I have not held that.
Okay.
disc.
I haven't either.
Maybe
Luke and the Hammers asks.
we had them in store for a while.
Yeah, Luke and the Hammers asks, how do we feel about it? It's like a Zone and Envy had a baby. Sounds like a great disc. Sounds like Brad's like dream disc right there.
I know. Okay, can I say something like maybe really a little rude?
Oh, fire
like,
away.
They just those just creep me out.
Where it's like you can't tell between the two.
No, I just don't like any of their nomenclature.
Doomsday.
Like
Doomsday.
they just,
Gotcha.
Doomsday. Yeah.
I thought you were saying like discs that are like halfway between two discs. Those creep me out. I was like, I mean, that's a weird stance, but okay.
No, like I don't know. So here's we carried some online for a little bit when they were first kind of coming out. We carried them in the store. We still have a few in the store, but Plague, Pestilence, Bleak, Cataclysm, Famine, Dystopia. They depress me. I just don't want to throw something that makes me feel depressed.
You know, and
like
it's definitely
I just don't love it.
It leans into a niche. There's a niche that is all about it, and it's like their perfect setup. And I think that's really cool. I do like that we have like that option in our sport, but I can definitely see polarizing sales and polarizing stop sales.
Yeah, right. Well, and I here's something I will say, and Hunter, Trevor, and Connor were talking about it yesterday during a meeting we had, and they were talking about like it's like they're like a culture. They were just like kind of have like a vibe, and they almost had like they're almost playing roles like the Doomsday Disc guys. They called like their factory like the bunker, and like they definitely have a character that they play, and like a I'm really struggling to find the word persona. That's the word I was looking for. Would you agree? Did you talk to those guys at all?
I did not end up talking to Doomsday at all while I was there.
Okay. So interesting. Yeah. Creepy. Bunker Buster is hilarious. Hilarious time though to throw.
Yeah. It's the Bunker Buster. Yeah. I would totally agree. Okay. Shadow Knight Disc asks, well, what point do you stop trying to fix a gap in a bag? And I mean, give up.
Oh.
At what point do you stop trying to fix a gap in your bag? And by that, I mean, give up.
Interesting. If it's not okay, I'm gonna just speak off the cuff. I'm not really thinking about what I'm saying.
Love it. That's what we're here for, Brian.
If I don't know, if it's not fixable, does it exist? Like, is it an actual problem?
Fair. That is,
you know what I mean? Like,
point.
How? I guess it depends what we're talking about specifically, but if you're like, oh man, I really want to find this like perfectly, it like will flip up and then be really overstable, like mid range. I don't know, and it needs to go exactly 250 feet and can't skip. Like, are you giving it too many like parameters that it needs to fill? So maybe you're creating the gap and it's not actually there. So I don't know. It's a very vague question, a very hard one to answer, but it's hard to believe that you can't fix a gap in your bag if it's actually there.
Yeah.
Again, unless you're like, unless you throw 300 feet today and you're like, I need to throw 500 feet by next month. That might be a little hard.
That gap doesn't exist. It's called get a new arm. Get a new arm and new shoulder and elbow and all of that. That's going to let you do, or just become Anthony Barella. It's fine. I think I think that's good advice. I think that if you're having trouble filling a gap, it really could be because it's just not actually there. The other thing that I will say is that we talk about how many discs exist in the world, right? Like, Brad, would you say that the number of discs that you could place an order for, let's say every company actually allows you to order at least one of every mold they have?
Okay.
Which we know is just not how the world works. Like, you're not going to be able to order blanks. We can't order star picks because the world's dark and full of terror. But we'll just say you could order one of every mold. Over under 1,000 options.
Over.
Yeah. Okay. So there's so many options out there, and even inside of that, we can go 7-5 -2-1. You've got the rhythm. You have the sting. You have like there are so many options almost at several flight numbers. Like we joke about how many zone clones there are out there. We joke about how many destroyer clones are out there. And so there is this phrase that is said that like you don't need to worry about seasoning in discs and things like that because there's something that fills that slot off the shelf for you. Like there's just this belief there cannot be this many discs without having the ability to cover every slot. And I'm going to go ahead and put my foot on the ground and say that I think that that is incorrect. I believe that I in fact will go ahead and make the I'll go on the extreme side. We'll pull a real Isaac Robinson Evelina situation where I'm going to make a stance and probably look like a dummy for it. But here we go, Brad. Are you ready? You talk about you're not thinking about your here. Okay, so not only do I think that there's not a disc that like can solve every slot that currently exists, but I think for every single player in disc golf that there is some spot in your bag that will only be solved by seasoning in a disc to that spot. Like, and that spot's going to shift for person to person, but there's some slot that you have struggled with for a long time if you're listening to the show. And the reason you're struggling with it is because you've just never given a disc enough time to season in to that spot.
Right. I think that's a fair statement because, I mean, I think what you're saying is theoretically, flight number based, there's a disc for the spot you're looking for.
Yeah.
But based on your body type, your throw, your angle, your arm speed, that changes that completely. So there may be like a gap per se. I think that makes a lot of sense. I think for me, I have one of those. I think for me, it's really, I don't think I have the finesse to throw like a really straight like putter like off the tee. So I have to really lean into like seasoned end like an envy. I season in an envy to go like pretty straight off the tee for me because I tend to, my error is like torquing it, like pulling through and like over across my follow through. Right. So I have to kind of lean into a disc like that. And then I also have that gap between like my Quake and like my Hex that I'm really, there's discs I can throw that'll probably fit that, but not exactly the flight that I want. And I'm seasoning in a baseline Bobcat for that.
Yeah.
So I think I completely agree with you on that statement.
I think that's where I've come full circle on the overstable throwing putter. I wanted an overstable throwing putter that's going to reliably fade, but I want it to actually push. And what's crazy is if you give a pig, like an R Pro pig, and you season it in a little bit, they get more glide and they push farther. And what I'm looking for is just a seasoned R Pro pig in that slot.
Yeah.
And so we're like, what I have in the technical throwing slot right now is I have an A5 in that slot. And I'm thinking that the A5 does push farther than an R Pro pig usually. And so maybe the disc I'm looking for is just a seasoned A5 that has like a little bit of, it's still going to fade every time, but it's just like a little more push and things like that. So that's why I've struggled to find that slot. I also think about like just below a buzz where the Hex fills for a lot of people. My bag has been so fluid in that spot for so long. Is it a Buzz SS? Is it a Dune? Is it a Origin? Whatever it may be. And it's like, oh, I really think that after having thrown Sacco, I got to play with Sacco, who was on the show. And that Buzz SS that or the Big Z Buzz that he talked about, I got to throw his, Brad. Money. It was so good. And it was just like, from that point on, I just took the Buzz, the Big Z Buzz that I got from you, and I was just fully yeeting it into trees through the rest of the round to try to season it in and get it a little flippier. Right. So, so that's where I feel at that point. That's I would say if you're trying, don't give up on it. In terms of, I would say yes, give up on finding a new disc. But maybe it's just right in front of you and it's one being seasoned in. Wyatt Woe _ OD. Do you still do lessons? Yes, they're back online. We pulled them down because we were trying to find rhythms with Leo, but they're back online, foundationdisc.com.
Boom.
Let's see. What does dome actually do? People say it adds glide, but some of my furthest flyers are pretty flat. I don't know if you've done a lot of research on this, Brad, but I'll say that dome confuses the mess out of me because I feel like sometimes domey discs are crazy overstable.
Yeah.
And then you have a disc like the dome. It is super understable.
I don't. Yeah, I started out. I feel like I have the wrong perception of dome because when I first started, all I kept hearing people talk about was if you want to throw further and you're new, you need to find first run domey Hades. That's like all that I heard people talk about at that particular time. So I was still traveling for work at that time. So every town I was in, I would go to their disc golf store, used bin, or Play It Again Sports used, and buy up all the domey first run Hades that I could find. I think I actually still have a couple down on my shelf here. So I don't know. I've heard that they make things more overstable. I've heard that they make them glide farther but keep the stability. I don't know. I really don't know. It's one of those things that I'm not convinced that there's actually science behind it. Someone at one point just had a domey disc and was throwing it really far and farther than other people around him or her, and they said, oh, it's because of the dome. And then people just started saying that thing.
Yeah.
If you were a physicist or own a wind tunnel or anything that can provide any scientific data behind that question and the Hyzer question, please leave it below. We'd love to talk to you more about this aerodynamics and the science behind disc flight.
Yeah. I think dome definitely has some effect for sure. What I would pay more attention to is the parting line. The parting line is what, where the two, because you got to think a mold is two pieces coming together and it's doing its thing. So two pieces coming together, and then there's that line on the side of the disc. The height of the parting line, I think, is really what affects like the flight overall. It reflects the flight the most. So
here's for our YouTube people. So here's like a proto Hades.
Yeah.
Boom. And then here's that first run. Like, look at the dome on this one compared to this one. I'm trying to get the angle right, but look at the dome. Considerable amount more dome.
Yeah.
And this is one my wife was throwing for a while, this particular Hades. It goes far, but it's also lightweight. So I don't know. Who knows?
Come on. Lanky DG76. What's your favorite gateway driver? I think I'm going the Aura. Aura
I think this
flips up so well. It's a fun distance thrower.
I think the Spear and Journey are really underrated. I think the Spear goes really far too.
Good. Yeah. Spear's real good.
Especially if you throw like 300, that's money for you.
The Spear, you and Jason were the ones who put me on the Spear. It's so good. Okay, Justin Kogan asked a great question. I think this is one that we can spend a quick second on. Is why don't more people build their bag with forehand and backhand in mind? For example, the Envy versus the Cash. I can't forehand a Cash, but the Envy is a backhand super overstable and a forehand super understable. So the pro that most people don't realize does this, and according to fan surveys, super polarizing. But Joel Freeman will actually not put a disc in his bag unless he can forehand and backhand it.
Makes sense.
So, fascinating concept.
That's interesting. Yeah, I don't know. I think just for me, I don't want to carry around like a 38 disc bag. I think that's really all it boils down for me. Like I just like to have a disc that I can do both with. I definitely lean. There's definitely a couple of discs I have in my bag that I'll like only forehand or I won't forehand, but most of them I would do both depending on the situation. I definitely lean heavier on certain ones, but I mean, I took the lift out of my bag specifically because I'm like, oh, it's only forehand disc. It's all I usually use it for. And then I've started to backhand the zone because I used to only forehand the zone. And I thought that was silly after I set it for like 2 years. So I don't know. I don't think there's anything wrong with it, Robbie. I mean, unless you do. I think it's just more of like your preference. Like I don't want to have 3 or 4 mid ranges and then for backhand and then 3 or 4 mid ranges for forehand.
Yeah. And
You know what I mean?
if I'm misunderstanding the question, Justin, I think that's what he's sort of asking is like, why don't more people do what you're saying? Is like, I put discs in my bag that I want to be able to forehand and backhand, because he's like the Cash versus the Envy. If he like the Envy, he can't forehand because it's super understable, but he throws it great on a backhand, things like that. So I think that it's certainly a preference, depending on, like Brad said, how many discs you want to throw. What I learned is I filmed a video. I filmed buzz battles. I did the buzz versus the hex this week. Did it without realizing it when played in 43-mile-an-hour gusts of wind. When my truck started getting blown side to side as I drove to the course, I was like, I don't think these neutral mids are going to go very well. I think this is going to be a time. And I learned in that video, and I mentioned, because I have a friend who forehands a hex all the time. Like it is, he forehands a glow hex, loves it. And when I was trying to forehand things, those 4 discs, I had 2 buzzes, 2 hexes. I just realized part of the way through the video, for me, I don't love forehanding super neutral stuff. I love to forehand. I would rather forehand something super flippy and watch it stand up and like learn that angle and get it to ride, rather than something neutral that just the slightest bit off and I'm turning it the slightest bit too much and it's never standing up, kind of a deal. So I think I will say my biggest reason I think, Justin, that people don't build their bag with both ways is because they're really confident on one of the shots and they're not very confident on the other shot. And because of that, that inconsistency makes them not really want to lean into, like I said, throwing these neutral discs, because they're inconsistent on that shot. So therefore, they just don't ever think about it. And so then they end up pushing discs into slots where it's like, I only throw these on blank. Like that fear. And I mean, that's legitimate, right? Like if you're fearing a disc, you probably shouldn't be throwing it. Oh, I don't know what happens when I throw this. Like hard.
Yeah.
Okay. Clinton asked, best vacation area for disc golf. So far, mine has been Myrtle Beach.
Interesting. I've never played disc golf at Myrtle Beach.
Yeah.
It's really hard. I feel like I'm really spoiled because I mean, there's a lot of really good disc golf right here. I would think if I'm picking somewhere, like I'm like, oh, I really want to go play disc golf here. I definitely think it would be beautiful to play in Colorado.
Yeah.
Just because, I mean, scenery, and there's a lot. Yeah, right. There's a lot of like, it seems like there's a lot of good disc golf there and a lot of good courses. Also, obviously, Maine, right? So, I mean, there's like what, Maple Hill, and there's a lot of like pay to play stuff up there that's really nice. So I think, I gotta say, those two would be a pick, and then I guess another third pick would be, I think I gotta go to Finland and play, right? Or Norway. I mean, I've been to Norway. It's very beautiful. I've never played disc golf there. I've been there, but it's beautiful there, and I think it would be really fun to play disc golf in another country.
Yeah. Most expensive vacation that I'm putting on the scale is definitely Europe. Like going to play disc golf in Scandinavian countries would be amazing. Then I would say cheapest, probably getting to Charlotte. If I'm just going on a disc golf vacation, heading to Charlotte, they've got a billion courses there. So it's like, that would be super good. But I would say sleeper pick that's a fun place, because I think also, like, I'm trying to think about this question, not in framing it just where it's like, oh, we're going to play disc golf. It is, where would I go on vacation that also has disc golf? So that's why Charlotte is like, I'm not really ever going on vacation to Charlotte, just like to go to Charlotte. But San Diego was a blast. San Diego, really fun place to go on vacation at. And within an hour of like really downtown San Diego was a ton of really cool courses. My guy Jimmy took me around and showed me to a bunch of places. And then Morley's right there, which is like one of the most classic courses ever. And Morley was a blast. I could have just gone and played Morley every day. Totally worth it. So San Diego, I'm going to throw that as a sleeper pick for vacation. Okay, let's look at this. We got time for, what do you say, one or two more, Brad?
Let's do
Okay.
two.
So, we'll say if you made your own disc golf board game, what mechanics would you include? So, I'm going to pick one mechanic because Jason and I have talked about this a lot. So,
Mm-hmm.
I'll let the cat out of the bag because it's on Jason and I for not really sitting down and planning it too much. But the idea of a disc golf board game that I think would be really cool, high replayability is what I'm looking for. So even if you play like, we'll use probably the most classic disc golf board game that's out there right now, Birdie.
Mm-hmm.
Birdie's complication is, to me, and they kind of fixed it with Birdie 2.0, is that if you sit down, you and I sit down to play Birdie, Brad, we're not actually playing for 20 minutes once the board is set up and everything. Not even because I have to teach you. It's just all the preset things that you have to do to determine how you throw, all of that. Like, just takes a while. And you don't even feel like you're playing the game yet while you're like drafting to build your player. Yeah. So the two mechanics that I would throw, because I think one of the best parts about disc golf is that you can pop out the car as a fresh player and just start playing. Like, just grab a disc, here's the basket, go. I love that. So I want you to have variance in how you play the game, just based on strengths and distances and putting and all that. So I want that to be a quick process. I want that 3 minutes or less. So, but I do want it to be a drafting type deal. But I don't like, so that's something that I want it to be a draft your player so that you get to choose like, ooh, I'm going to try throwing far this round, but I know that I'm going to leave good putting on the table and we'll see how that goes type deal. And then the other is the idea of, we had this like dream of, it's like a deck, right? And there are 3 decks that represent every hole you play. So you have a tee box, you have a fairway, and you have a green. I shuffle all 3 decks independently. And then as we go to play, every hole, I draw the top card from each of those decks. So it could be like overgrown tee box, golf fairway, jungle green.
Yeah.
And it's like there are flight statistics that are happening. And then I'm playing cards to sort of use my bag as I go and play the course. And then you have the RNG of like how the different fairways and holes play. No holes are basically ever going to repeat themselves because you have just a ton of combo and variance and things like that. So those would be some of the main mechanics that I would want. I wanted to play fast. I wanted to be lighthearted. I want it to be fun, but I think the biggest thing is that right now we are trying to target disc golfers with a board game. I think the proper way to do it is to target board gamers with disc golf.
Yep. Agree. I was going to jokingly say I think the best mechanic is to just go play disc golf instead of play a board game about playing disc golf personally. But I also think that, I don't know, I like games where the reason I think I like Wingspan a lot is I'm building an engine, right? So I want to build attributes or advantages like over time. So I want to like, goals and then be able to win those things and be able to give myself advantages based on accomplishing things, I guess, if that makes sense. I don't know what you actually call that. We'll just say engine building. That's what I'll say, because I think that's a lot of fun, Yeah.
So Brad's trying to engine build. Our last question, for the Q&A for this set of questions comes from I had it and then I didn't have it. Nope. There it is. Jonathan Gaggle asks, what do you think the biggest mistake players make with their bag or molds?
Wow. That's a very big question. The biggest mistake
players make with their bag or mold.
Okay. I'll say it because this is just speaking from experience.
Fire away.
Caring so much about what everyone else is throwing and doing. I think that is the biggest mistake people make starting. You should throw things that you like how you feel, that make you feel good throwing them, and that you can improve and learn. It doesn't matter like what your favorite pro is throwing. It doesn't matter what your buddy says you should throw. You should throw again, I'm not saying don't take advice. I'm just saying take it all with a grain of salt and make sure you're enjoying what you want to do. Don't put any weird rules on yourself, or just, you got to learn to play and enjoy it first, and then you can start getting technical. That's my advice.
Yeah. So Brad and I talked about this before the show. We're talking about sort of having some pivots here on the show, because we have lots of people that have applied to be on. I would say greater than 50% of the people that apply to be on the show have too many discs in their bag. Like, just too many discs. So sure. when we're thinking about like bringing people on and trying to have an episode, it's like, okay, it's sort of a weird system to be like, oh, you have a problem with understable mids. Also, you have 3 understable mids in your bag, or you've got one that's like, you have a problem with understable mids, but you have an origin sitting right there. Mm-hmm. Okay, I don't know what state that origin's in, things like that. So maybe pivoting to having several more episodes where we're just helping people sort out their bags. So I think the obvious answer would be people just have too many discs, too many choices. But I'm going to go ahead and say, because I think that this is not just for beginners. I think this is an epidemic for experienced players. The biggest problem people make with their bags and molds is expecting certain flights out of discs that they actually are not getting.
Right. Yeah. Repetitively.
If I had $1 for every single time someone tried to convince me that their hex stands up, rides perfectly straight, has a little bit of turn to it, and finishes back, I would not need to work anymore. Like, I would retire based off of hexes alone. That mold, I have just developed this like hard-headedness towards, because so many people try to convince me that's exactly what their hex does. And they're like, yeah, this neutron hex is exactly, it does. I had this Lazadal, dude, and it just shoop, and it fades back. And then I watch them throw it, and they throw it on Hyzer, and it barely stands up, and it flies straight, and then falls out of the sky. Yes, when you throw it on Anheuser, it turns and comes back. But like, that's not what a hex does, and it definitely doesn't do it for you. Like, and it's just every single, and I would say truly, I feel like every person has that disc in their bag that they're like, this is what I want this disc to do, and I keep trying to force it to do that, and it's just not doing that. Like, I know I have those molds in my bag that are not doing it, but I really do think that people fall in love with a disc thinking it does something for them every time, and it is an infection to the rest of their bag, because it becomes the cornerstone that all of the other discs around it are built off of, and then it just creates problems. We take the hex, for example. If I think that this hex is going to turn and do that every single time, I'm not going to look for something that's legitimately having some turn, because I think that hex has turn. So I just let that hex cover so much of my understable slot. And then I'm like, oh, what if I need an easy turnover? I don't have it because I'm convinced that the hex has it. So then I actually create a hole or a problem in my bag, or I make the jump from a hex all the way over to, let's say, an uplink or a paradox. And I'm like, yeah, these are like, the hex is just really a step up from the uplink.
Yeah. Right. It's a very good point.
What?
I think,
what?
Yeah. I think another way of saying that is like realizing what is your throw and what is the disc. Maybe, right?
Yeah, like let the disc be what the disc does. I am trying so hard to ace with Precious Child right now, because Precious Child, as much as I love her, I will always hold on to her. I will cherish her. She is going like right behind my head. Like it is easily going on the wall. But I haven't aced with it yet. But Precious Child is legitimately the flippiest putter I have in my bag right now. So I actually put a streamline range in my bag because it does what Precious Child used to do. And I'm throwing the range more than I'm throwing Precious Child, because if I threw a range and Precious Child side by side, one turns significantly more than the other. And I just kept trying to think, oh, Precious Child still has some stability. Oh, it still has some stability. I'm going to throw it. It's going to stand up and it's going to fall back down. And it's just not. And it's getting me in so much trouble because it's turning over. I'm holding on to what the disc was doing.
Yeah.
Can't do that. Like I can't. And so I didn't want to put a lid in my bag, or I was trying to put a lid in my bag for this flippy disc. And it's like, nope, they flipped. So it happens to all of us. But yeah, I do think that every single person has that disc in your bag. And the moment you accept like at least one of those discs, the moment that you start accepting, oh, this is what it actually does, I think you're going to be a better player overall. But Brad, soapbox that I didn't even realize I had until we got here. But passionate about it. Speaking of passion, I got to feel a racer for the first, like really, I got to feel a racer in the wild again. I remember when the racer came out. As a passion guy, or a passion disliker, I guess I should say, is the racer just like a passion on steroids for you?
Yeah, I don't like it. No surprise. No surprise.
The
there.
moment I felt it, I was like, Brad has to hate this disc.
I did. I picked it because I was really excited about it. I'm like, oh, this seems like a quote unquote destroyer I can throw. You know what I mean? And I picked it up and I was like, nope, not that disc, not that disc. Stop putting beads on drivers, people. They suck. They're terrible.
Or stop putting them on the rim. Like it's fine if I guess you would have somewhat of like have it on the inside, like the stalker. But no.
Yeah. I also don't like the stalker.
That's fair.
Just throw. At least I'm consistent, if nothing else.
If it has a bead and it's faster than a 6-speed, ABB's out.
Yep, I'm out. 5-speed, great, love it. Throw it all day.
Oh.
But I don't. Whatever. Anyway, speaking of complications and discs, there's all kinds of discs in this warehouse in front of me. So let me tell you about them today. So Mint released a nocturnal freetail, which sounds enticing because the freetail is very flippy, depending on what weight you get it in and what plastic. But I just have accepted I like a glow plastic in any. I prefer that plastic in any manufacturer. Don't know why, but these feel great. I think they'll add a tick of stability, possibly, since it is MVP plastic. So I'm looking for that. They also released the Eternal Bullet, so that's going to be an interesting.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to throw one because I might actually really like that.
Yeah.
I like the idea of like the bullet, but again, it was Royal, their base plastic for a while, and I just didn't have any interest in throwing that. But it might be fun to switch it up a little bit.
Eternal is
they
glow?
feel really good. Eternal is their like Z plastic.
Okay.
Yeah. Apex is like their ESP, and then I should say Neutron. I should use the right nomenclature. But Nocturnal is their like Eclipse, basically.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but anyway, those are releasing this week. We're also releasing. So the Glow CD1 Discmania Originals came out this week, as well as this really cool Horizon Glow PD. That's like the year of like winning or whatever the actual title is. But very cool discs. They glow pretty well and they look beautiful. If I threw a PD, I'd throw one of those. They have like all the cards, like playing cards, like Ace, King, Queen, and so very, very cool stamp. And also we restocked our Zero Gravity discs from Latitude. We sell out of them every time we get them. I mean, they're great for like kids and new players. I mean, these are super, super lightweight base plastic discs. When we do our junior series, we make sure we have them in stock because I mean, some of these kids, I've seen like some 6-year-olds like smash some of these pures. I mean, throwing them like 150, 200 feet. Oh, it's pretty impressive. So shout out Elias if you're listening. But yeah, very cool. Something we also restocked Chip Locked. We got a Chip Locked restock. Little tease. Keep an eye out for another video with Chip Locked on the channel as well. And if you don't know about Chip Locked or how to play, check either there's a little bit of a tease of that in the Imposter series, but also the guys have played it. Did they play it with you, Robbie?
They did not.
Okay, I know they've played games on and off. So, but anyway, yeah, you can check out how to play it through some of the videos. Just search Chip Locked on our channel. Something exciting we're doing as well is we're starting our revamp of our Patreon store, the Hyzer Club, and we're starting to make some custom runs that maybe have sold out that we held a couple back for, or like some extra sub box stuff that we've ordered, or and in this case, it's like Discmas, right? Really good molds, really good, and they're going to be extremely good prices. But only our Patreon folks are going to, only the Hyzer Club are going to have access to those. If you wanted a birdie hunter and you didn't get them, we're going to release them in the Hyzer Club only. For example, we're going to have some Gorgons and some FDs and some Buzzes and a lot of really cool stuff in there. We also are going to have a section where sometimes we get returns, like people will get a shirt and they're like, oh, this is definitely too small or whatever, or a hoodie, and they get sent back to us. They're not used. They're perfectly fine. They were just the wrong size. We're actually going to put that up for our Hyzer Club folks as well. So you have access to that stuff too. So very excited about that, that change to make. So if you're not a Hyzer Club member, you can join today. And you get behind the scenes content, extra podcasts, extra videos, all that stuff. So make sure you check that out. Yeah, exciting week next week. We have some MVP release. We have some Discraft release. Discraft release is the following week. And then, just keep it. We're back in the regular season, Robbie. We're getting releases every week now. Everything's ramping up. Disc golf is alive again. So make sure you check it out. As always, if you're unsure about trying something out, try it out. We have foundation care. Try it out for a little bit. If it's not for you, you can email us and we'll help you replace it with a disc that you know you're going to love. But in the meantime, we hope that all your discs are good. You keep in the bag, and we'll see you next week.